And there it is. Welcome everyone again to our June Q&A with Sam McCormick, General Manager of the Assabet Co-op Market. I'm Lauren Bell, Director of Outreach and Communications for the Co-op. And we're so happy and thankful for you being here with us this morning on a hot Sunday, June 6th. I hope after this meeting, you guys are getting out well protected, of course, but getting out to enjoy this beautiful weather. And I'm going to turn it over to Sam. Again, the Co-op, I just mentioned it to you guys, but the Co-op is an initiative to open a full service, community-owned grocery store that sources from local farms and local food producers, a sustainable grocery store, a truly sustainable grocery store, more than 1,650 member owners already. And we are in the midst of our site search process. Sam is going to give you a little word about that as well. And then if you want to become another proud owner in our co-op and get great owner benefits, you can go to assabetmarket.coop, click on become an owner and join this awesome movement. And I'm going to turn it over to Sam now. Thank you all for joining us. And then we'll have a Q&A at the end. Again, you can put questions in the chat, or you can just jot them down and wait for the end, and we'll try to address all questions we get. Thanks very much. And I'm going to mute myself and turn it over to Sam.
Great. And I think we have one lovely person who has joined us on a phone. And the request is, do you mind muting yourself? We are getting a little feedback through there, and I don't know that we have control over muting a phone participant. So I think that individual needs to do that from their phone. Thank you so much.
And I'm sorry, I didn't mute myself yet, but when we get to the end, I didn't mention the events. Maybe I'll just mention it now, just a quick, we have a lot of events coming up. We are so psyched to get back out there to the Acton Farmers Market, the Maynard Farmers Market, the Hudson Farmers Market, Sienna Farms coming up. I'm sure we'll be back at Small Farm at some point. We've got Hutchins Farm we're going to. So tabling at all these farms is one of the coolest, most fun way to interact. And luckily now with masks and outdoors, we can all do that. So if you're interested in tabling, you can email me, LORNE, at assabetmarket.coop. That's Lauren at assabetmarket.coop. Let me know you're interested, and I provide you all of the information. It's the whole script, the FAQs, and it's really just talking about what we all already love, our community-owned grocery store and signing up new owners. So that's my little spiel, and I'll turn it back over to Sam, and thank you.
Yes, and Lauren, if you don't mind just dropping your email into the chat, that would be great. Just a reminder to folks, anyone who's joining throughout, that we do have a live transcript option. So if you need closed captioning, you can turn that feature on for yourself. It's at the bottom of the screen. If you click on the CC live transcript, that should turn closed captioning on your device. Just also a reminder to folks to mute yourselves as you join the call. We are getting a little feedback from a couple of folks. All right, so we have some news from the board that just went out this weekend, which again, as a reminder to folks, I and Lauren, we are not talking about anything regarding the site update that the board has not already talked about, right? So the board does set the standard as far as what I can share. A reminder from some previous Q&As, the board's decision for this point in the site search is that a release of an actual site option to you all, the owners, to the public, would be after the signing, either the purchase of land or property or the signing of the lease. So that much I will remind everyone of, but the board did share that we are in positive negotiations right now, and I can affirm that. It's really exciting to be at the point in a process where we are negotiating on something we are, and so what I can share is the kind of the previous steps that get us to this point. So in being in negotiations, that means we had a building inspection done. I've been meeting with folks from our now advisory panel of store development support folks from within our ownership, talking with folks who are experts in their field, whether they're engineers, architects, designers, other folks who own businesses, checking in with those folks, and also working within the grocery co-op industry and talking with folks who are experts within their field, whether they're people who are experts on negotiation, experts on store planning, things of that sort. And those have been a lot of the conversations, as well as connecting with and starting to have conversations with folks for the potential future of positive negotiations, talking with architects and designers and contractors. So those are a lot of the conversations that I've been having. And in the process, we're thinking about some shorter term project management as we look at a future where we would hope to have a site announcement soon. We have the project management to have an open store. And then we have longer term project management, which I've spoken more about on previous calls, about our infrastructure development to be prepared for that, right? So those are things that I'm really digging into more on a regular basis. So we look at policy and procedure development for a future store, talking about staffing plans and how we set up our kitchen, what kind of menu are we going to have? We're really starting to get into some of that stuff. At least in my perspective, that's the real fun stuff, right? Even just sitting at home and talking with my partner, but like, ooh, we get to, think about menus sometime soon and things like that. So it's getting exciting in that sense. And reminder to folks that we're a member of the NFCA, the Northeastern Food Co-op Association, and that provides us with a ton of support within the local food economy. And that's something that I wanted to emphasize today, because as I think about something like prepared foods, or we think about specialty items, a lot of those things are where we fall hyper local, right? In our produce, in our specialty, our cheeses, our local brews. There's a lot of local brews and things like that. So those are the things that, as we think of infrastructure development, we can reach out to co-ops like River Valley in Western Massachusetts. We can talk with Urban Greens in Rhode Island. We can talk with Monadnock. We can talk with Middlebury, all these folks that are within driving distance of us and who do source from a very similar set of folks that we'll be future sourcing from. And it's always interesting to reflect with those folks on how they made it through the pandemic as well. And a lot of these co-ops succeeded in ways that other smaller, medium-sized businesses struggled in because of the strength of the teams that they had. That is the piece that has come across really strongly. And as I reflect and talk with those folks and think about how we set ourselves up for success, for future success, I want to consider those things and really try to smartly design our space so that we are prepared, and we would hope that we don't have to deal with another version of this pandemic. But we can kind of think in a future sense, like, how can we design our office spaces so that we don't have to completely reconfigure that in the future if we needed to? Or how do we look at having the best kind of air quality circulation from when we open, because it's a benefit regardless, but it's also a requirement if you're dealing with pandemic issues. How do we set up all of our front end register stands so that if we had to put screens up, we can put screens up, right? So these are all things that, in talking with other folks in the co-op world, it's been really useful to take in tips and critiques and things that they have from having experienced this and some of the lessons learned. But again, the reminder, that main takeaway, and I think I've talked about this in every call and I will continue to do so, is the strength that we bring as a co-op is in our customer service. It's in the way that we treat every single person who walks in the door. And that's going to continue to be a very strong area of focus for me as we look at opening a store. It's the physical structure, the way the shelves are placed, the kind of merchandising, the quality of the products on the shelf. That's all really important, but it's only as good as how the staff lift up and care for the people who come into our space, right? So that will continue to be a strong area of focus for me, to make sure that we're incorporating that in as we think about how do our systems work? How do we do the processes of keeping our store open and running, and thinking of care for staff in that, because how do you expect staff to care for other folks if they themselves are not taken care of? So in the ergonomic design, in working our hardest to make this an ADA compliant space, and to figure out the ways in which cost is a factor in that, and the ways that we can either raise the funds to make that completely applicable and no barriers, or in having to discuss with experts ways that we can get as close as possible to being an accessible space, not just for shoppers, but also for staff. Even if that means just considering remote options for employment and things of that sort. We're really just trying to use the wisdom of the folks who've been experiencing every kind of hurdle that we could anticipate. We like to think of it as kind of, it's like fire drill planning, right? You plan for the as many circumstances as you could think of, and you then set up systems that prevent you from getting to that point, but also in a positive way, allow you to have the most capacity that you possibly could. So really just trying to think of those pieces as we look at our physical structure development and at our infrastructure and our staffing and our procedures and all of that. The only other thing I wanted to note was we have some good community connections, and I appreciate our board really working to connect me with other folks in the community. Also, if any of you think of me and you're like, Sam, have you talked with this person or that? Feel free to bump Lauren or send a message through our info at. I am really happy to connect with any and all folks that anyone would consider. I mean, I find value in meeting everyone within the community, so it doesn't have to be a position of stature, right? If there's somebody that you find is connected or invested in the local economy, the local political scene, anything like that, I am so happy to meet folks. And now that I'm fully vaccinated, my partner is, and restrictions are starting to be lifted in Massachusetts, I'm feeling comfortable with meeting people in person, which is a whole new world of things. To think of like, oh, I could actually go downtown to Maynard and meet folks at a coffee shop or at a bar or something. So just keeping those things in mind, I'm really happy. Any introductions folks think would be valuable. And for instance, I am trying to connect with local orgs. So I'm meeting with the steering committee for the Maynard Anti-Racism Alliance this coming week, just to be, we've done a paired event with them in the past, but trying to find other ways that we can better support that work in the local area. And if there's folks similar to that in other towns surrounding Maynard, really happy to connect with those folks as well, because we're looking at this as kind of a regional impact as well. Those are my main pieces for now. I wanted to talk a little bit less this time and leave more space for open conversation from folks. See what's on your minds, any thoughts or questions you have about what's going on with the co-op right now. So want to open up the floor for questions, comments, conversation. Yeah.
And you folks everyone can just, ask a question. You can raise your hand if you want with the raise hand option under, I think it's under participant or under chat. But in any case, you can also just ask, or if you have a question, you don't feel like chatting or you don't have your audio on, you can type it in the chat box and Sam can answer your question that way. And then the only other thing is, if you're just going to start talking, just remember to unmute yourself, because you may end up asking a full question and nobody hears you. So just remember to go down to the bottom left and click unmute. Yeah. Everybody is automatically muted.
And again, if anyone's comfortable turning their camera on, you are not being recorded. I'm the only one being recorded. Your voice will be captured if you ask the question, but your video is not being recorded. So feel free if anyone wants to join on video as well. I'm just trying to see. I have there we go. What was I going to mention? There's some fun stuff while we're waiting. If anyone has questions or comments, I can just keep talking. I have a bottomless pit of information. I can just keep talking forever. So interrupt me. But one of the cool things that Lauren and we were talking about doing, and it's turning into a real thing, it's happening this month, is we're going to start meeting with local vendors. We don't have an established vendor agreement list right now. We are working on that policy itself and the things that would go into alignment with our ends, which the board is working on right now. So like better, more specific definition of our ends, which really sets us up with a lot of our operational practices and policies. But one of the things we do want to do before even having agreements in place, I haven't met a lot of local vendors. Again, I moved up from Philadelphia at the end of January. I know all those, like I could holler at anybody on the street there, and from like 100-mile radius, a lot of those farmers from Philly. So I need to start getting embedded in that local vendor community here, meet folks, meet local producers. And we're doing that as a very broad lens of like vendor being, whether that's somebody with local produce, whether that's a local brewer, if that's a bakery, if that's any kind of production. Really happy to meet with folks. So just putting that little shout out, if you know of or are a vendor and you haven't heard from us yet, we're really happy to hear from other folks that may want us to come out. And we're doing it as a mini video series. So we want to accumulate some just like questions that we have for some local vendors, have a little bit of an interaction, get some footage of different local farms and really highlight folks. This is like also kind of a free advertising opportunity for a lot of local vendors, because there's nothing we get out of it. We just want to talk with people. And we were like, why don't we just do video? Because we can then highlight people as well. So that's something fun. And so we have at least 2 dates on the calendar in June. And those are those on Facebook, Lauren?
No, I haven't promoted them. I kind of want to get the video going, because it's not really an event for people to attend, but it is something that we want to share and talk about. So that will be coming. You will see posts on Facebook.
Yeah. So even if you'll see just like kind of a note about it, that should be coming up. And we've got the first question. So David, who's on our board, is on the call here. Thank you, David. So the ends are part of the policy governance documents that do govern how work is done here at the co-op. And in the last year, policy governance didn't have an application because it is a process that works from the owners, voting on the directors. So we have a board of directors, and then the directors are held to specific standards. The policy governance lays out those standards for the board of directors. It also lays out standards for myself as a general manager. And there are ways that we interact. And for future, more specifically, there's ways that the work that I'm doing with staff and how we operationalize and interpret some of these policies into operational action, those are then reviewed by the board and reported back to the ownership on that. So it's a process. And we actually have that. I'm doing this circle because on the website, you can actually click on it. And there's a nice graphic that kind of walks you through that. So the ends are part of this. There's these global ends, and there's statements of values essentially for the co-op that are part of our policy governance. And one of the things that I'm working with the board on is having a baseline starting definition that's coming from the board. And I'm part of the process, but really providing a way that we can, as we think about marketing and branding for a store, as we think about policies for staff, as we think about that, it gives a jumping off point for how we interpret those ends. And the end statements have a lot of value. That's talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion items. It's talking about local, how do we define local, and vendors and producers and support for community. It's really getting into those things that essentially define like our everything from the top line to the bottom line of our of our pro forma and our balance sheet. What kind of things are we selling in the store? How are we trying to make those things accessible to people? How are we treating the staff? What are we doing with our profits? It impacts all of those things. So thank you for the question, David. It looks like we have a couple of others. Yes, Suzanne. So the update was not anything major, so you didn't miss anything huge. I was just ripping off of the board communication that went out, which noted, I think the change that's being noted is that we are in negotiations on a site, and I can't share anything beyond that. But the thing that I did share is some of the things that lead up to negotiations. So we did have a successful building inspection done, and I've been having conversations with the folks that would be in the next phase of the process. So I've been in conversation with architects and store designers and contractors, and all of having those conversations in preparation for the hope of a positive outcome on negotiations. So that is the current site update, and I hope that I know it's still vague, but is more specific than it was before. Any other thoughts or questions from folks?
I have a question. I'm Margaret Miley in South Acton. Nice to meet you folks. I'm wondering, is the cooperative a worker cooperative in addition to being a consumer? Are there two stakeholder groups or any intention to move in that direction if that's not the case?
That's a great question. And the answer is right now, the co-op is incorporated as just a multi-stakeholder, not a worker. So it is not two different bodies that encompass the ownership. The statement, as I've heard it from the board, is like, of course, all staff are welcome to become owners and in that way be part of the owner body, but it is not set up as a worker cooperative at this point. I hold worker cooperatives in great respect, and I really value that work. And I would say that if there was any thought or interest in that, it is a different structure. I will state that I believe that the current structure that we're in is different than that, especially just from a documentation standpoint in how the co-op was legally filed, right? And at the moment, the budgeting for the future co-op being open is based on it being the consumer-owned cooperative. So just from those two perspectives right now, that's how things were planned, and that's what I've walked into, and received for planning purposes, if that makes sense. But we'll be working with a lot of worker co-ops, and we already do. We work with, we get our printing from a worker cooperative in Boston, and we are going to be getting most likely coffee from worker-owned coffee, a lot of interaction and work with,
So I missed something, and maybe so it's legally incorporated as something that could be a multi-stakeholder cooperative, but the governing documents have it organized, address it only as a consumer co-op. Is that what you just said?
It's filed as a consumer owned. Sorry. So when I said multi-stakeholder, I meant consumer owned. Yes. And so both the incorporation and the governing documents are as a consumer owned cooperative at the moment. Yes.
Super. Thank you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Just a reminder, if you have a question, you can put it in the chat, or you can just speak up. But if you speak up, please make sure to unmute yourself by going to the bottom left corner of your screen and unmuting yourself. Otherwise, we can't hear you, and we don't want to miss any questions.
Yes, and if your video is not on, if you could just give a shout out with your name, so I know who I'm talking with, that'd be great. And I just want to say I appreciate we have a couple of board members on the call today. I also see some of our volunteer folks, I believe I see on the call. So it's great to see some familiar names and faces. And I'm so happy I now have more familiar names and faces. It's gotten better with each Q&A. Yeah.
I just want to remind everyone, as Sam mentioned, volunteers, we have really felt like we have turned a corner on a number of fronts. And right now, I am so excited. I mean, the first year I worked for the co-op, we did more than 70 tabling events across the community. And that's part of the reason why we've grown so much over the past 4.5 years. We are back to tabling this summer, and I have at least a dozen, if not more, tabling opportunities. And for those who don't know, tabling is getting out there behind our table where I joined 5 years ago, and talking to folks about what we already love, our cooperative, and asking if they're interested in joining. And it's a lot of fun. Of course, you're at farmers markets and farms, so you can also, say, excuse me for a second to your partner at the table and head off and get some great fresh produce and fresh honey and all that kind of stuff. So it's just a great way to interact, and so fortunate, we feel so fortunate this year that we can actually get back out there. So if you're interested in tabling, please, I put it in the chat, but I can put it again, please email me, LORNE, that's Lorne, at assabetmarket.coop. I need a crew. We already have a crew, but we need an even larger crew of tablers this summer, and it's going to be a lot of fun. And I give you everything you need to make it a success. So.
Yes. While we're just chatting, interrupt me if you have questions. I wanted to note, there was a post that went up on Facebook. We were having some IT issues with our website. So there was an apology on the website, and we really were working against some unknown features on the website that were preventing new member signups. So we're hoping we can make up some ground with that. And the thing that I always ask of everybody, if you think that everyone in the area has heard about Assabet Co-op Market, because some of you have heard about it a lot, and you're getting all of these notifications and all this. The thing that is absolutely true, and that I remind people of, is a lot of people have not heard about Assabet Co-op Market. And the one thing that everyone can do is just at some point in your daily life, just talk about it and see if you know of anyone who's interested in becoming an owner, being a part of this thing. I think it's really awesome. To me, it's not a selling thing. To me, we're doing an amazing thing here. The community owns the space that we hope to have open soon, that you get to be an owner in a place that supports the local economy, that lifts up the local community, that hopefully will help impact sustainability work in the area. So to me, I'm like, I'm not telling you, I will talk to anybody. You could just introduce me to strangers on the street and I will tell them about the co-op, because it's such a cool and awesome thing. And then you think about how we're interacting and part of this huge cooperative network, both nationally and internationally. It's pretty awesome. I've never worked in a space like, I've worked in other industries and never found a space that has quite this quality of care in how we do things. And sometimes that means more conversation and more meetings, but that's okay if it comes to a better values and ethics place in my mind. That's a really important thing. So tell everybody about us. And if people have questions, send them to Lauren. I'm also happy to talk with people too, but I have a lot of conversations happening, so I don't publicize my email currently. But any questions, and Lauren always passes stuff along to me if it's relevant for further conversation or introduction. Yeah.
Yep, and I will second that. You bump into me on the street, or you call me, or whatever you want to do, email me. I'm happy to meet you. I'm happy to talk on the phone and talk to your friends about it. We used to do a lot of house parties, as many as we possibly could do, where a co-op owner would host a party for neighborhood friends and that family and that kind of thing, and I'd come and I'd present. I'm happy to do that virtually, and we'll talk about whether we get back to it and when we get back to it in person. And part of that's your comfort level too, but certainly outdoors, we could do an outdoor pool co-op info session at your house or whatever, and I'm happy to do that. And on that note, Sam, about that we're really doing something good here. I never feel like I'm selling anything. I guess that's what makes it. That's probably what makes the pitch, because everybody in this actually cares about this. It's not a product. It's a store. It sells products, and my 4.5-year-old is already talking about getting cool food at the co-op. I have to keep reminding him it's not open yet. It's not open yet. But yeah, this is an opportunity to be part of something that not only do we all own, but we all care about, and shared values, and of course, we also get the store and all the local farms. So feel free to ask a question. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that was all. I'm just being chatty.
I was just going to say, feel free to ask your question in the chat if you don't want to chime in, or you can just ask your question. Just a reminder, unmute yourself from the bottom left corner, because you're automatically muted when you join the meeting.
I was just going to say, folks, I've gotten to meet one of Lauren's kids, and he's the youngest little ambassador for the co-op. It's the cutest thing.
Yeah,
he's very serious about it, and it's commitment to the co-op and everybody who's part of it. All right, well, I think we'll give it till 11:40, 11:45. We'll start wrapping up. If folks don't have questions, if you do, feel free to chime in. And one of the other things to think about in the meantime is, we have a lot of standard co-op work coming up, and I think the board mentioned that. So just to put in a little lift for the nominations committee, the board is looking for folks to participate in gathering nominations for a few seats for the board in the coming election. So that's another thing just to highlight right now. If you know somebody who's just connected within the community, that's a key piece for folks right now, because it's also then knowing who has skills or experience that is relevant to what the board might be looking for. So yeah, if anyone knows of folks within the area who who might be a good fit for this, or who think you are, feel free to email the board, and we can put that in the chat as well, board@assabetmarket.coop. There are a couple of board members who keep an eye on that inbox and are happy to field any questions that come up. So that's also another avenue if you have questions about where we are progress-wise with the store development work. You can email Lauren, or you can email the board. And I think Lauren just put that in. Yeah. So just wanted to put a little note in there for the nominations committee, because I know that's another piece in the board's communication. All right.
I
want to do a little shout out here. This is David. I've been on the board for a little over a year. I'm sort of the board's COVID baby. I joined when my time opened up a little bit when COVID came on. And my shout out is to just how incredibly lucky we are to have the staff that we have. I mean, most of you know Lauren. He's been around for several years, and he's really, helped us grow and move along all these years. And now with Sam, we talk to folks nationally in the co-op community, and 201, they all tell us that we hit the GM jackpot with Sam, having them sort of guide us into the future every time a new thing comes up, and that's about every day. We discovered that Sam has the skills to manage whatever that new thing is. So we've been very lucky to have them. And as you talk to other co-op members, if they have yet to have a chance to, sit down on one of these things or reach out to Sam, they are very attentive and very skilled. So just want to throw that out to you, that as a board member, and I think I speak for the rest of the board, we are just thrilled to have both Lauren and Sam represent us. So that's all.
Well, thank you, David. And I will say that I appreciate that, and I appreciate the validation from the co-op community. Some of that may just be that a lot of folks know that when I don't know something, I ask somebody who does. That's one of my baseline starting points, is we don't have to make this up, right? There's no part of what we're doing that somebody has not already done. And so I think from the very first conversation I had with David with the hiring process, I was like, I know exactly what I know, and I know what I don't know. And there is never any shame in leadership in saying, I don't have an answer for that right now, but I do know the folks to talk with about this, and to get you the accurate information so we can make a decision, right? And then we can make a logical and sound decision with accurate information. So that's a big part of what I lean on if we ever approach a situation where we don't have all the information at hand. Margaret, did you have a question right when David was?
Yeah, but what David shared was so much more profound and wonderful. And David, that COVID baby idea, that's going to stick with me. My goodness. Anyway, this is just a tiny thing. And if it were busy, I wouldn't have brought it up. But I was really impressed with your commitment to accessibility. And you may have already thought about this, but the idea of setting up the cashier station such that people can sit down.
Yes.
You've thought of it. Thank you.
It's one of the biggest things
in the world, and we just don't.
No.
We've got this weird work ethic that everybody needs to stand up for 8 hours or something in this country, and that adds value to customer service. I don't get it. So thank you. I'm glad that.
Oh yeah, I've worked I will say this has been out of necessity. Every business that I've managed and been in a leadership position, I have worked every single position within that business. And for the construction company, that meant I started out as a laborer, and just because I needed to know that I knew the work, right? And with front end work, I have done that for many years. And there's nothing quite like having to stand for 8 to 12 hours. It's one of the unnecessary things that, yes, is seen as a customer service standard. And I believe people give better service when they're more comfortable and they are positioned in a way that they have, accessibility in mind. And it's something that I like to encourage whoever manages the front end to keep in mind that if their staff gives feedback on something like that, ergonomics are really important. Repetitive motion injuries within positions like that are unfortunately very common. So continuing to think about ways that we can better accommodate staff is absolutely part of the picture. Yeah. All right, well, it looks like we are close to a wrap up time. I really appreciate the questions, the thoughts, and continue to bring them. Like I said, anyone you can think of, if it's yourself or anyone else that I should connect with further, I'm really happy to. Right now I live in Somerville with my partner, but I do make it into Maynard at least once or twice a week on a regular basis, and that is part of my future commute to that area. So I don't have any issues with making any part of my workday time in that area. So folks I should connect with, let us know. I'm really happy to. And I love this opportunity because I've said this many times, but walking into a position like this during a pandemic is one of the hardest things in not being able to meet community, right? And just have an event and I can just freely walk around and meet folks and get to know things, because I struggle with names. That's something I've struggled with my whole life. And that's not a cop out in forgetting anyone's name. It's just how my brain works. But I do remember details about people and getting to know folks and kind of getting to know things that set us apart, that make us unique. And I miss that, right? That's part of what I really love about these Q&As. So even if I only get to interact with a few folks, that's great. It's still more, and I get to have a better sense of who the ownership is of this awesome space. So I really appreciate everyone being here today. It looks like we are going to wrap up now, and I thank you all so much for your time.
As I said at the end of the prior meeting with you, we look forward to seeing you in the store.
Yes, I can't wait to welcome everybody into a store. It's going to be a great time. Absolutely.
All right.
All right.
Thank you guys again. Thank you so much, Sam, for taking this time regularly to interact with our owners on their clock. And of course, Sam and I will be out there in the community at local farmers markets and local farms. We're doing these farm visits coming up, so we'll publicize those and interacting with potential vendors from our list of more than 100 potential farms and food producers that we have met over the years. And we are psyched to get back out there. And thank you guys so much for taking so much time. Have any questions, you can email me, Lorne, L-O-R-N-E, @assabetmarket.coop. That's right there in the chat box. And again, the nominating committee for board directors has started up. So please email board@assabetmarket.coop if you are interested in being on that committee. So thank you guys again. Thanks, Sam.
Thanks, Lauren. Thank you all so much for being here. Yep.
Have a great weekend, everyone.
Have a good one.
Bye-bye.